Happy Saturday. My name is Stacey Leanne. I love makeup and I'm a huge horror fan, so if that sounds like you, let's hang out. This week we are talking about Final Destination and the inspiration behind the movies. I will be going in with P. Louise's new Mystic Midnight palette. It is so gorgeous. Everything I use will be listed in the description box down below, but let's get into it. Millennials everywhere suffered the same ass puckering trauma getting on a plane, a highway, or even a roller coaster. Every time the wind blows, every time a pen rolls across the desk, every time a fan gets turned on, we ask ourselves, is this it? It's toe curling and not in the fun way. So, the Final Destination universe spans across 6 films, 10 novels, and a 5-issue comic book miniseries, all with the same premise. A group of people narrowly escaping a catastrophic event only to be targeted by death, who seeks to claim the lives that were meant to be lost. Final Destination actually started as a spec script for X-Files titled Flight 180, which was never submitted but later developed into a film by X-Files producer Glenn Morgan and James Wong. A key element is the premonition experienced by the protagonist, often a violent and deadly event. This vision allows them and a select group of others to escape disaster. After escaping the initial disaster, the survivors find that death is not finished with them. They are pursued by a series of accidents, each seemingly designed to mimic the way they were originally meant to die. The series often establishes a specific order in which the survivors were meant to die in the initial disaster. Death seems to adhere to this order, with each accident claiming a victim according to the predetermined sequence. As the movie goes along, the protagonist tries to outsmart death, often by identifying the patterns in the accidents and trying to intervene or prevent them. The film explores themes of fate, free will, and the human struggle against an unseen and unstoppable force. They also touch on themes of grief, survivor's guilt, and fear of death. So let's look at the timeline. So the story actually starts in 1968 at the Skyview restaurant, which opened and closed on May 16th. Iris and her boyfriend Paul attended the opening of the Skyview. Iris, after receiving a vision of the restaurant collapsing, she manages to prevent the disaster and in turn saving all the people in the tower and causing a lot of family bloodlines that were never meant to exist. She manages to prevent the disaster and in turn saving all the people in the tower and causing a lot of family bloodlines that were never meant to exist, changing Death's plan. The story moves on to Final Destination 5. The bridge disaster occurs in early 2000 with 3 survivors, Sam, Molly, and Nathan. 2 weeks later, though, Nathan and Molly board a plane to Paris. The events of the first film follow on with Alex having a premonition of Flight 180 crashing. Alex snaps back, telling everyone they need to get off the plane. Alex and his friends are removed and they watch the plane crash. Parts of the plane landed on a bar where Nathan is having a drink, killing him instantly. And obviously Sam and Molly were on the plane. With the new survivors, they set out to survive Death's plan. In the end, Alex, Clea and Carter are the only survivors, finally heading to Paris to celebrate. While sat outside a cafe, Alex pulls out a piece of paper and brings up the order of deaths again. Since nobody actually intervened in Alex's death, Carter jokes that Alex is still next. He looks around and starts to panic, walking backwards into the street, and he narrowly misses a bus, with Clea shouting to him, "Watch out." The bus crashes, causing a sign to swing down. Carter pushes Alex out the way before he is crushed. And before the two can compose themselves, the sign swings back, killing Carter. Alex is actually killed sometime later in a freak accident where a brick lands on him. Now, Clea, in an event to avoid death, she actually checks herself into Stony Brook Psychiatric Treatment Centre. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Flight 180, Kimberly is going on vacation to Daytona Beach for spring break with her friend. As she's about to pull out onto the highway, she has a vision of a highway pileup caused by a log truck. As she is about to die, she snaps back. In a panic, she pulls her car around to block the cars. A police officer, Officer Back, gets out of his car, and Kimberly is trying to explain what she experienced just as the massive crash happens. Death starts picking off the survivors almost immediately, starting in reverse order, the first being Kimberly's friends. Officer Back saves Kimberly from an oncoming truck that hits her car and kills her friends instantly. Now Kimberly, trying to figure out what is happening, visits Clea. But Clea doesn't want to get involved. She said if Kimberly was smart, she wouldn't worry about the others and just save herself. As more of the survivors start to die, Kimberly turns to Clea again. This time, Clea takes her to the one person that can figure out Death's design, William Bloodworth. William reveals to them that only new life can defeat death. Kimberly remembers a pregnant Isabel Hudson who ends up in labour at the hospital. Kimberly, Officer Back and Clea head to the hospital. Isabel's baby is born, and they think that they have defeated death. But Kimberly has another vision, and Isabel was never supposed to actually die in the crash. After this, Clea is killed, and Kimberly, working off a previous vision, believes she is the new life, gets in a van and drives into the lake. She does drown, but then she is resuscitated, thus making her cheat death and skipping back as she is the last in line. Sometime later, they are invited to the Gibbons house, who was one of the survivors. They go for dinner and they talk about how things are finally getting back to normal. Mr. Gibbon mentions how Brian was saved by Rory. Kimberly and Beck look at each other before the barbecue grill, with Brian in front of it, explodes, entirely obliterating him. His arm lands on Miss Gibbons' plate and she screams in horror. The following movie is 6 years after Flight 180 and 5 years after the Route 23 pileup. Teen Wendy Christensen and her friends go to an amusement park, celebrating their graduation from high school. Her friends decide that they are going to go on the roller coaster called Devil's Flight. Before boarding, Kevin Fisher and Jason Wise have a coin cross to see who's going to sit in the front car. Kevin loses and he ends up sitting next to Wendy, who was initially unwilling to go on the ride. And Jason, Wendy's boyfriend, sits at the front with Kerry, her friend, and Kevin's girlfriend. Upon getting on the roller coaster, Wendy has a premonition of the roller coaster's hydraulics failing, causing the cars to derail and killing everyone. The vision ends and Wendy hysterically screams for the staff to let her off the ride. The attendants open the back cars, letting Wendy and Kevin off. Hot-headed fellow graduate Lewis starts the fight, forcing an attendant to kick them off, while several others get off the ride due to their impatience. Before the ride starts, Jason tries to get off to help Wendy, but the attendant ignores him and starts the ride without the others. Wendy desperately tries to stop the ride, but it is too late and Wendy's fears are confirmed. Wendy desperately tries to stop the ride, but it's too late and Wendy's fears are confirmed when she and the others witness the cars fly off the track. The cycle starts over again, and honestly, the worst death scene has to be the sunbed one. That was horrific. Or the one with the weights where they come down. Oh, brutal. After this, Wendy starts looking at the photos she took with her camera on the night of the accident. She spots some ominous things in the photos. Wendy and Kevin learn that the clues to the survivor's death are hidden in Wendy's photos taken of the night. So the survivors start to die. Then 5 months later, Wendy is at a subway station and begins to see signs of death. Julie and Kevin then meet Wendy on the subway, when suddenly Wendy has another premonition of the subway train crashing, killing everyone, including Julie, Kevin and Wendy. Wendy then snaps out of her vision and tells Kevin about the doomed train. Her and her friends do try to stop the train, but it is too late. The train is already in motion. Wendy's panicked face is shown through a window seconds before the screen fades to black, followed by the sound of screeching metal, leaving their fates unknown and ending the film. Now, 8 years after the explosion of Flight 180, 7 years after the Route 23 pilot, and 3 years after the Devil's Flight derailment, college student Nick O'Bannon has a premonition of a car crash while watching a race at the McKinley Speedway, which sends debris into the audience, crushing some spectators and resulting in the stadium partially collapsing, killing almost everyone present in the 180 section. In a panic, Nick convinces his girlfriend Laurie and friends Hunt and Janet to leave, followed by a handful of others who become angry with Nick after he pushes past them to escape. A security guard named George intervenes when everyone begins to argue outside, just as the catastrophe Nick had foreseen occurs. You'd be pretty grateful, right? I mean, would you though, if you knew what was going to happen? I don't know. If you survived, but there are no survivors, so I don't know what's worse. The survivors start dying. Nick and Laurie begin doing research and they learn about the disasters that occurred in the previous films and discover that the survivors who were saved by the premonition begin dying in a series of improbable accidents shortly afterwards. The film carries on, people start dying, and then Nick has a premonition about Laurie and Janet will die while watching a film in the shopping mall cinema after an explosion in a room behind the theatre. Nick rushes to reach them while Laurie begins spotting the omens, warning her that danger is not over. Once Nick arrives, he and Laurie attempt to convince Janet to leave, but are unsuccessful in their efforts. Janet is killed in the explosion by a piece of shrapnel, and Laurie is squished to death by the gears of a malfunctioning escalator while trying to escape. But it does all turn out to be a long premonition. Nick then realises that it hasn't even happened yet, but is unable to save George when he dies just as predicted. Nick hurries to the cinema, and despite death pinning him to a pillar with a nail gun, he is able to save his friends by extinguishing the fire and by triggering the fire sprinklers that would have caused the initial explosion. This is a beautiful concealer, by the way. It's by Troublemaker. I think it's something like £2.50. It's really nice. 2 weeks after these events, Nick is wearing a cast on his right arm, notices a loose pylon outside of their hangout and warns the workers about it before meeting Laurie and Janet inside. Moments later, he deduces that the more disaster premonition was merely a red herring meant to lead them to where they needed to be for death to strike. At that moment, the pylon collapses, causing a truck to swerve and crash into the restaurant, then running over and finally killing the last 3 survivors, Nick, Laurie and Janet, together. As the final scene turns into an x-ray scene, Janet is shown to have been crushed under the tyres while Laurie's neck is snapped, decapitating her. And Nick is thrown into a wall, bashing his skull and jaw, sending one of his teeth flying into the camera before the credits roll. And this leads all the way back to Final Destination, Bloodlines and Iris. In 1968, 50 years after college student Stephanie suffers from a series of nightmares about the collapse, she returns home seeking answers and is greeted by her father Marty and her estranged brother Charlie. The siblings visit their Uncle Howard, Aunt Brenda and cousin Eric, Julia and Bobby. When Stephanie asks Howard about Iris, her maternal grandmother, he explained that Iris subjected him and Stephanie's mother, Darlene, to an overprotective upbringing, which I think he would, then became reclusive, causing child services to take him and Darlene away. Brenda gives Stephanie letters from Iris, leading her to a fortified cabin in the woods where Iris now lives. Terminally ill Iris tells Stephanie she disrupted death's design by warning Paul and the guests to leave the glass floor before it broke. As a result, the tower never collapsed, but death began killing the survivors and their descendants who were never meant to exist, including Paul, who died in an accident, prompting Iris to document death's omens in a book. Though Stephanie is skeptical, Iris follows her out of the cabin to give her the book and proves her claims by letting a chain reaction cause a weather vane to fatally impale her through her mouth. Wow. Stephanie reads the book and finds a reference to someone identified as JB. The family realizes Death is targeting Iris's bloodlines in order of age, so Marty and Brenda are spared, as they're not blood relatives. Eric is skipped due to being the result of Brenda's affair. Lucky him. Darlene suggests visiting JB at a hospital, who turns out to be none other than William Bloodsworth. Present at the tower as a child and also terminally ill, he warns the family of the consequences, cheating death, and explains 2 ways to defeat it: taking another life or dying and being revived. Stephanie, Charlie, and Darlene flee to Iris's cabin in Darlene's RV, intending to hide Darlene from death. The RV then crashes through the gate, causing Stephanie's seatbelt to jam. The cabin explodes after a chain reaction, sending the RV into the water, and Stephanie begins to drown. Darlene saves Charlie from the wreckage and ushers him to rescue Stephanie before a lamppost falls and bisects her. Charlie breaks the seatbelt and resuscitates Stephanie. A week later, before Charlie's senior prom, the siblings realize Stephanie was only unconscious during the drowning, and at that moment a train derails into the neighborhood and several logs fall onto Stephanie and Charlie, killing them. So ultimately there are no survivors, but let's talk about the theories. So, death as an entity. This theory posits that death isn't just a passive force, but an active participant in a game, enjoying the challenge of those who try to cheat it. The premonitions are seen as a way for death to play with its victims, giving them a glimpse of their fate before claiming them. The intensity of the deaths and increasingly bizarre circumstances surrounding them are seen as part of death's game. Death's design and consequences. This theory emphasizes that death has a predetermined plan for everyone's demise, and that interfering with this plan results in negative consequences. The intensity of the deaths and increasingly bizarre circumstances surrounding them are seen as part of death's game. Death's design and consequences. This theory emphasizes that death has a predetermined plan for everyone's demise, and that interfering with this plan results in a negative consequence. According to the movie database, death's design can be disrupted, but those who cheat death will face increasingly gruesome and unavoidable deaths. The movie establishes rules such as the order of deaths being determined by the initial disaster, and that interfering with others' deaths can alter the order. The theory suggests that death punishes those who try to cheat it by using its servants to inflict the most gruesome death. The premonitions are hereditary. This explores the idea that premonitions like those experienced in the Final Destination series may be hereditary. Some fans suggest that the visions are passed down through bloodlines, potentially explaining why multiple members of the family experience premonitions. You know, when you love a product and it's almost hitting pan. I might need to do a little order. Right, rewriting the rules of death. Some theories propose that the latest movie, Final Destination Bloodlines, introduces new rules or interpretations of death's design. A movie blog suggests that a large number of survivors in the Skyview Tower collapse, who were not meant to live, represent a massive system failure for death's design. This could imply that death's design is not as rigid as previously thought, or that it's constantly evolving. Final Destination is interesting because in a general horror film, there are villains and there are heroes. And if you see death as a cosmic force, then there are no heroes and there are no villains. It's just something that is inevitable. That was deep. Put that on a t-shirt. And now there's a whole new generation to appreciate Final Destination, and it can give them nightmares. And that's the Final Destination movies. Have you read the novels? Have you read the comic books? Have you seen the new movie? Let me know down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you